All right, now I want to show you how to get rid of these event handler methods. These methods are not doing anything. They're simply delegating to our view model. And it's extra code that we don't want to write. To get rid of these methods, we use an interface called iCommand. iCommand is an interface with two methods: canExecute, which returns a Boolean, and execute, which encapsulates some behavior. That's where we put our logic. Now earlier, in my recipe for extracting a view model, I told you that you should replace any references to control or the page class with data binding. Now, as an extension of this principle, anywhere you have an event handler method, you can replace that, well, most of the time, with an iCommand interface. So, here in our playlists view model, if I declare a property here, public iCommand, let's call this add playlist command. It's a public read-only property. Let's bring in the namespace. Now don't worry about the initialization of this property. We're going to look at that in a second. But now that we have this property in this class, we can use data binding in our XAML. So instead of using this clicked attribute with the name of an event handler method, we can use command attribute. And here we use a binding expression. Binding, the name of our property is add playlist command. Now, when we click this toolbar item, Xamarin sees our command object, our iCommand object, and simply calls its execute method. It doesn't care what is behind that object. It just knows about iCommand interface. So I'm going to delete this clicked attribute and use the command attribute instead. Now let's go back to our view model and initialize our command. So in the constructor, we set add playlist command to a new command object. Let's bring in the namespace. That's defined in xamarin.forms. Now this constructor has a few overloads. We can give it an action of object which represents a method like this. So a method that is void and takes an object. Now if this sounds complicated, you really need to watch my C# Advanced course. We also have another overload for this constructor that takes an action. So it doesn't have any parameters. I want this command object to wrap my add playlist method. This method is void and it doesn't take any parameters. So I can add this method name here, add playlist, as a reference. And note that we should remove parentheses. So we just want to add the method name. When we use the method name without calling it, it represents an action. So we can use it as an argument to the constructor of command class. So this is how we set up a command. A command is simply an object with a standard interface, which is iCommand. And this object simply wraps a method, in this case, add playlist. When we are in XAML, when we are working with Xamarin, Xamarin doesn't care what is behind that command. It knows this command has a method called execute, and it simply calls this method. When execute is called, that command object internally would call our add playlist method. Okay? Now the final step. Because we have exposed this add playlist method as a command, it's better to change its access modifier to private. Because we want to simplify the public interface of this view model, we want to reduce the number of properties and methods. And this makes this class easier to work with. We can always call this method via the command that we have exposed. So exposing both these members is kind of a duplicate. Now in the next lecture, we're going to look at this iCommand interface one more time. And this time we're going to use it with our other method, select playlist.